Good day to everybody. This is Mike Hittner with Historic Point Basse Update, and hi to everybody out there in TV land. For some of you, it's been a while since we've seen you. Today with me, joining me, is Larry Knutson to my right. Welcome, Larry.
Good day.
Yes.
Beautiful day today.
Yes, it is. We want to go through a little bit of what we've been up to in the last probably 3-4 months. We've had a few programs, Bonnie Wolfslegel and myself, on Robert Wakely and Mary Wakely in the last couple months, but we're going to do a little something different. But we want to go through a few things that we've done in this past year. Of course, it was an unfortunate year for everybody. I mean, anybody in the business like we are, as a 501c3 or something like that, that has no large income other than from different people that come to our site and partake in different events. Last year, 2020, we had ice cutting, and we had the winter feast, and then we had the whodunit, and then we had the fall harvest fair, and that was it for 2020. Some of those events could be held safely because they were mostly outside. Other events, because of the numbers rising or something with the COVID, we just didn't feel comfortable with having the public there and exposing our own people that are working on the site, the citizens of Point Basse. So we're looking forward. We're filming this in early 2021, and we're looking forward not to a normal year by any means, but hopefully a bit of normality. To let you know, the ice cutting isn't happening this year with Point Basse taking part in the Port Edwards Lines fishery. The Port Edwards Lines called off the fishery just because I don't think it was because it wasn't safe from the outside point of view, but they did things in the shelter house that was pretty close proximity. And most of the lions, like Historic Point Basse, active members are a little older, maybe a little more susceptible to things. So they didn't want to take a chance, so they canceled it, so we canceled off our ice cutting part of that. And so we're not a part of that, unfortunately, but we look forward to it in 2022. Also, the Winter Feast has been called off by our membership and also by the Nakusa Community Center. We let them know that it wasn't going to be possible. In order to keep you safe, we'd have to isolate everybody at certain tables, and that just isn't going to work for numbers for us. We have to have 100 people there to break even, and then after that we hopefully make a profit. And so with the band and everything else, it just wasn't in the cards this year, but we look forward to Winter Feast in 2022. So our next event, and we got our fingers crossed, and I think it might be possible we'll do it. It's mostly outside. It's Wakely's Sugar Bush. So that'll be in the end of March, and just watch our website and you'll be able to tell if it's going to happen or not. We're still looking at that as a possibility, but it all depends on numbers and also on the safety of our people that work there. We got to guarantee their safety, and most of them, like Larry and I as representatives, are 70 years or more. So we want to make sure those people are all safe in what they do. So we want to encourage people, if you have students, young folks, first through probably 4th grade, to let you know that we do school tours. Now, probably nothing's going to be touring in the spring, but in the fall, I would think we'd be close to normal again, and we'd encourage you, if you've got school kids that age, to talk to your teachers, talk to your school employees, and find out if they'd be interested in taking some groups out. Normally, we do about 20 to 25 groups a year. And for us, it's a lot of fun. I guess, speaking only for myself, but Larry can talk too. I think I get one of the biggest charges and most satisfaction out of the school groups. And I'm sure that's for Larry. Larry's usually, well, he's in many places, but the cabin or the bunkhouse, sometimes the house. So he could be in any number of places. But
when you start talking about the kids that really have no clue about what the past was like, and you start talking about some of the things that were done back then, it kind of amazes them. And it's not really nice to see the expression on their face.
Yeah, well, I know, especially when I've talked to, and I've done the schoolhouse, which is I haven't done for a couple of years, but when they were short the gals in there, I'd go in there and then I'd play a record, and they can't have no conception of a record,
Yeah.
CD is about this big, and this record only plays one song on one whole side of this thing, and so they had no conception, so they were always amazed. Plus it was hand cranked, no volume control. The volume was what it was, and so it's amazing. And one of the main things that we find is that the students that come in during the school year, when they come to an event such as our Harvest Fair or our Point Bass Pioneer Festival, they come with their parents or their grandparents, and boy, you think they didn't learn anything when they're there. Like they say, well, this is how you grind corn. This is how you do this. They for some reason, kind of by osmosis, I don't know what it is, but I think a lot of times are they getting anything out of this? Certainly they are. And for a lot of students, I think myself included, and I'm maybe for you, Larry, not speaking for you, but sometimes we learn history a lot better if we could kind of do it rather than just some reading in the book or something.
It's one of the just super nice things about our site is we often tell people we're not a museum, we're a living history museum. And it's a hands-on museum, and that's one of the most interesting things about our site out there.
Yes.
Is that a lot of the stuff you see out there, we actually use. It's not just sitting there to look pretty.
Yeah, a lot of times the kids will ask, and they probably ask you in the bunkhouse, well, can I sit down on this bench or this chair or something? And they invariably, unless we're using it for some other purpose, they can sit down in this chair or something like that, because everything is pretty much hands-on in our buildings, other than maybe a few artifacts that just the interpreters handle, but not the citizens.
Delicate ones.
Yeah, the delicate ones or something like that. So we want to invite you, any school groups or anything, get in contact with us and probably set it up for maybe in the fall. I think would probably be a safe time, September, October of this year sort of thing. So,
or any other groups, not necessarily just school groups. If there are any other groups, we had a representation from the forest industry out there that we gave a special tour through the site for, and all you have to do is contact our site, and if anybody has an interest of anything like that, any club you belong to or anything.
Sometimes a person is looking for something, and I know the forestry one had met at the meet-in for their state conference or something like that, and they were looking for something to do during the day for the people, so they went to Alexander House, and they went to Mead Witter Paper Museum, and then they came out to Historic Point Basse, and we've had handicap groups out there. We've had a lot of senior groups and stuff, so we're open to just about anybody as long as there's enough bodies and we can do it. If we got a smaller group, sometimes we've had like 10 or 12 people, and they say, well, it maybe isn't worthwhile. Well, then sometimes what happens like that is Larry and I will do the whole site. Larry will do 2 or 3 buildings, and then I'll do 2 or 3, and we just flip the group. And so that way we can do it with just 2 people. We don't have to have 6 people, 1 for every building or something like that. So keep it in mind. We certainly we're here to serve the public, and that's our job, and we enjoy it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. But today we're going to do something a little different. Larry has brought some things that he has collected over many years, Larry, I'm sure. And we're going to talk about what they are, maybe hold them up and describe them before we actually tell them what it is, because maybe some of the people out there can guess what they are.
Well, that's some of the things we have. I've done in the past at the home show. We've had a what is it table. Some of the things I've got here today, it's you may know what it is, but what I want to do is kind of stimulate your interest in history a little bit. So maybe give a little stories about the items I have here today. I guess we can start out. One thing that I have at my site, we have at the cabin, and it was very important in history. It's something that's called ship's biscuits. These are very hard biscuits. All they are is flour and water. And they were started probably about the 17th century, where they used them for the sailors on ships.
Have you eaten one, Larry?
I have not, and you do not want to eat one. Just take it. These are not like your grandmother's biscuits, believe me. Well, not like my grandmother's biscuits, I should say. They're extremely hard, but the reason they were made this way for the ships was for transportation purposes. It was much easier to transport these than raw flour. And what you would use these for you would add them to your soups, and some people would add them to the coffee or the tea. They would take and you have your tea, and you would take and you would break this up, and then you soak it in whatever liquid you have, the soup. During the voyageurs era, they used it in their pea soup to thicken their pea soup. So basically, it's just a flour and water baked really, really hard for a long period
And that's
of
why
time.
they soaked them up, because a lot of these people didn't have maybe many teeth at all, and they're not going to eat that. And if you do have teeth, you're not going to eat them for very
Right.
long.
Yeah. This is another term for these ship's biscuits. Were jawbreakers. So, that's the term they had. Another item that they had was, or another term for them were worm castles. That was a little bit more negative term for them. But,
Now, do you have a illustration or a showing of the hardtack? Do you have the hardtack?
I have some hardtack. This is actually the precursor to what we know as hardtack. Now, hardtack is something that came a little bit later.
It looks a little more like a cracker.
Yeah, it's probably more people recognize that. It looks more like a cracker, and it's got little holes in it like this. But it's the same thing. Again, it's extremely hard.
It's probably just flour and water like this.
Correct.
Is.
Correct.
Now,
Now,
how long would something like that last, Larry, on a
well,
voyage?
I've got a couple interesting stories.
Good.
One story is that in the end of the Civil War, or excuse me, the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783, they had a great deal of these ship's biscuits that were made for the troops. Well, at the end of the war, they didn't need them anymore, so they put them in barrels and they put them in storage. Well, lo and behold, the War of 1812 comes around, and they needed extra resources for the War of 1812. And they took these out of storage and gave them to the troops to eat. So we know they have a life shelf life of at least 30 years there. And probably longer than that. Now, the reason they're called worm castles is some of them that have been in storage for 30 years, they tended to get weevils in them. And when given to the troops, they would, again, like I say, they would, a lot of these troops were very hungry and starving, so they would take this and they would take their tea and they would break this in their tea, and those weevils would float to the top, and some of the troops would pick the weevils out, and some did not pick the weevils out.
Well, it's probably extra protein.
The weevils were extra protein for
Yes.
those that were really hungry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, good.
another interesting fact with these is, as we know today, when they made flour back then, the white flour was given to the gentry. That was the richer people and stuff. Ship's biscuits were mainly made out of what they call the middlings of the wheat and or the poorer wheat. Okay, but it was like a whole wheat type thing. Well, today we know all the nutrients in wheat is in the middlings of the wheat. It's
Right.
not in the white flour. So unwittingly, the troops are actually fed better, more nutrient wheat by using the ship's biscuits.
Like my dad used to say when he sold feed, he says the bran and the middlings they fed to the animals, but it was the best stuff they had, and the humans ate the purified white flour,
Which was
nutrient
deficient.
absent. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's one of the important things. But again, ship's biscuits have been around since the 1600s, if not before. I'm not absolutely sure when they started. Another little thing when you're talking about troops and is and something very simplistic in history is candles. Candles were very important. It wasn't until much later in history, well beyond the Wakely period, when they started to come out with kerosene lamps and things like that. So candles was mainly your source of light in the evening and so on. So things that they made candles from, a lot of candles were made from beeswax. And beeswax makes nice candles because it actually drips none or very little.
So it mostly it burns up the beeswax.
It burns up the wax, so you don't get a lot of dripping in there.
Or if you get paraffin,
Right.
you get a lot of.
Well, paraffin actually was after the Wakely period. So what was used before the beeswax was tallow. They would use beef tallow or beef fat, and they would make candles out of that. So the nice thing about beeswax too was the smell of the beeswax. It has very little smell, if any whatsoever. Where tallow candles had a rather
Kind of a
horrific smell, or whatever they call it.
rancid smell
Yeah,
or something.
it can
to
have
it.
a pretty rancid smell. But you do hear a lot of stories about during the Revolution and people lost in the wilderness thing about eating their candles. The reason they ate the candles is because they were fat. They were tallow candles.
Yeah.
So therefore, it actually was a good source of
And
nutrients.
I can relate to it too, just down at our site, that if you leave any like beeswax candles out, if the mice are around, if they're hungry, they'll chew on those a little bit.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
yeah, they will, you know, a little bit. Where paraffin, they probably won't too much.
Yeah, or bind them up.
For a lot of people that are out there that make their own candles, again, they have a tallow candle. And if you're going to go on a hunting trip, you may put it in a shell like this that you can have it transported in your hunting gear or something like that. So,
Larry, do you have any idea, let's say on the size of those candles there, how long one of those would last versus another? Or they're going to last like hour, 2 hours or something like that?
well, a candle this size, a beeswax candle this size, would probably last close to 8 hours
Okay.
on there, you know. Excuse me. The tallow candles, I am not real sure.
Yeah, and that's why beeswax was quite important during the Wakely and before that era, but also quite expensive, and that's why the children were kind of taught sun up to sundown. They didn't want to waste a lot of candles on the kids if they wanted to stay up and do something.
Right.
So when it got dark, 6 o'clock or something, then they were getting ready for bed unless they had chores to do.
Tallow candles also gave off a lot more residue soot with the
Smoke.
as they burned and things. So therefore, you got a lot of coverage of artwork and things like that. So the beeswax candles were really
Superior.
nice when they came up. Excuse me. One other thing that was popular way back in the Wakely time period was a little book like this, and this is called a horn book. And the reason it's called a horn book is it looks like a piece of cellophane on here, but that's not cellophane, that is goat horn.
Okay.
It's made real soft, you boil it, you make it real soft, and then you cut that real thin, and they would use it on a book like this. Now, a horn book like this was carried by just about all the children. Books were extremely rare in the 1800s and the 1700s and before. And so to have a book, you were very
Wealthy.
affluent or
Yes.
whatever. So the average
the
person...
same ones Larry eating the white flour, the gentry.
Right. Yeah, they would potentially have the book. But the horn book like this, the average person could have, and if you see this piece here, it's a little wide. A lot of the children would have this on a tong or something, and they would hang it from their belt or their dress or whatever. And excuse me.
You got to drink a little something stronger.
Yeah, I think so. It basically has the alphabet and the Lord's Prayer on there.
And that's
So-
their reading was based on that.
Right, that's how they could learn the alphabet, and then through the Lord's Prayer, they would learn how to spell a lot of the words and things like that.
And it's something that everybody probably would have had maybe in the home if they were a little wealthier as maybe a Bible, but if not, they'd have something like that.
Yeah, you're right. It's something that they could carry with them too as they moved about.
And would
things
something
like
like that be carried maybe by the voyagers or something too? Or maybe they didn't even read, so maybe it wasn't an issue for them.
I do not know. I believe some did carry them, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not 100% sure on that. Again, something for people. I'm hoping to stimulate people's interest in history today. So, something you could look up.
Okay, good.
Excuse me. When I talk, I kind of dry out a little bit. So, something else I made. This has been around for about 6,000 years. And it's a turkey call made out of a turkey wing. There's 3 bones in a turkey wing, and they make a turkey call of this, and they were found, like they believe, to be around for over 6,000 years.
So it's something that somebody found out by just trial and error or something.
It's amazing that 6,000 years ago, how did somebody actually
Take
have
those
the
bones
wherewithal to
apart
learn?
or put them together to make the sound. You want to play a little for us?
Yeah, it makes a turkey cluck.
No, yeah, no, is it calling the
Okay.
females or the males?
It would call in the males.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it may call in some females too, but
Yeah.
mainly using the spring of the ear.
Have you used it yourself on turkey hunting or something like that?
I have not, because I've given up hunting now.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
since I made this, I haven't used it.
Maybe one of our members, Tom Bramer, could use it because he has trouble getting his turkey quota.
Some hunters today believe this works better than some of the
Modern
calls
ones that you pay
because
big money for.
the turkeys got used to the modern calls, where this is a little something different.
Yeah, good. And since you're entertaining us, Larry.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be out and about, you're going to be in a hunting camp or something, sitting around a campfire at night, you want a little bit of entertainment. Somebody may have come up with called a jaw harp or juice harp.
Now, has that been around probably as almost as long as that turkey call?
Well, not quite as long because they're made of metal.
Yeah.
But during the Voyageur era, this is one of the trade items that they had up at Fort Michilimackinac
Okay.
up there. So they've been around at least since the 1700s, at least, and stuff. But what you do with these are a simple instrument. You just put them on your teeth, and then you.
So it would require that
that's
you
how
have to
you
have
play.
teeth, though.
It would require if you have to have teeth, yes, which is a drawback in some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. But the juice harp, if I had this at a campsite and I brought it out and I'd play a little ditty for you, but then I'd expect you to do a nice little jig for me at the campsite there,
So it's,
for entertainment there. So.
If you do something, then you got to do something back. Or
Well,
something.
yeah, fair play.
Yeah. Now, that one you figure has been around probably for 400 or 500 years, probably somewhere in that area since they worked with metal.
Since they worked with metal, right? They've been around quite a while at least.
And how does it get its name, Jews harp? Have you any idea?
Well, some of them call it a jaw harp, so juice harp. If you look at it on the internet on there, it's called a Jews harp, Jews, but it's really not anything to do with the Jewish community. or anything.
Okay.
They're not real positive where that term came from.
Okay.
So some people call it a jaw harp.
Jaw harp, yeah. Great.
Okay. Another item I have here. This is a bag that flour would have come in.
That's
Or
why
grain.
that's why it's tightly woven.
It's heavy, it's tightly woven, but the important part is a Bemis
It's
bag from the Bemis company.
a famous brand still in business, I
Right.
believe, yeah.
Yeah. Bemis was the first bag company that had machine sewn bags,
Okay.
but they were not widely accepted, not being hand sewn originally. Mr. Bemis in 1858 started marketing the hand sewn bag, and it also had the printing on it, which a lot of bags before that didn't have printing on it.
So probably he had a hard time breaking into the market because people just didn't trust it.
They did
That's
not trust him. So what he did to compensate for that, he had a 100% guarantee that they would not break. And if anything broke, he would pay for that product that was in that bag.
So he overcame that. Now, were they out of like St. Louis or something, Bemis? Or?
He started in St. Louis, Missouri, and because it was a good location to run his printing press to print on the bag and stuff, the headquarters of Bemis now is in Neenah, Wisconsin.
Neenah. Oh, wow.
So it's a Wisconsin company right
Wow.
now.
Nice.
But again, it's just something that, through history, these bags were used for a multitude of things. In my persona as a bird hunter at Historic Point Basse, I would use one to take along, probably to carry my birds back in or something like that.
Your pigeons.
Yeah. But these bags were very heavy material because they're transporting grains and flowers and things
want it
back
sifting
in.
through.
You want it really good material.
Right.
A little sidebar outside of the Wakely time period, in the 1930s and the Depression, a lot of the companies started putting very colorful print in their bags, and it was woven in. It wasn't just stenciled
Stamped.
on. It was woven into the material on there. And the reason for that, it was a marketing tool, because the women would start collecting these bags to make dresses out of.
Yeah.
During the Depression, you didn't have a lot of money, and clothing was hard to come by.
I remember, since my dad was in that business, not so much during the Depression, but in the 40s, that I remember some of those
up into the
bags coming
40s.
home and being used for pillowcases and stuff like that.
Multitude of things.
Yeah.
And the tool, or the thing was, is if a lady started a dress with a particular pattern, she had to keep buying your flour in order to get
more
enough
material. Yeah.
to finish that dress.
And as we know, of all you seamstresses out there, it takes a lot of material, a lot more than you think, to make something.
To make a dress from the
Yeah.
1930s.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So a good marketing tool out there for that. Something else I have as a hunter, well, anybody would have had back then potentially. I have a little fishing kit, but as a hunter, if I go out and I go for camping for a long period of time, I want to be able to have a little variety in my diet and stuff. And so I would carry a fishing kit with me. And in my fishing kit, the hooks they had during the Wakely time period and before did not have a hole in them to tie your line to. They were called a spade end hook. The end of the hook was just simply beaten flat like this.
How would you attach it?
And then you would tie your line with a knot. It's called a Schnell knot.
Okay.
And that Schnell knot is very, very good. There are some Oriental fishermen today that still prefer that Schnell knot over the eye and the hook in there. So you would have that Schnell knot. Now your lines would typically be cotton or linen. Linen being a little preferred line because it's lasts a little bit longer when it's wet.
You probably got a little oil, natural oil in it too.
You would typically, a lot of your lines you would wax
Wax them.
to help preserve them a little bit more. So you would have a line similar to this, and that would be a wax line that you would tie to, and or you may have something like this. Now this in my fishing kit, it looks very similar if you look at it close up. It's hard to see it in camera, I'm sure. If you look at it very close, it looks like monofilament line.
Yeah.
It's not. But this is actually silkworm gut.
Really?
Yeah. It's, if you ever heard the term catgut,
Yes.
it's an old
When
fishing
they use
term.
for sewing up
Catgut,
wounds.
well, catgut was not catgut.
Right.
It was actually silkworm gut. Okay. And in every silkworm, they have two guts in there. And you take those out, and it comes out about a 12-inch piece of this. And then you process it, and
And then
come
you
out
put
with
on
this
multiple
monofilament.
lines together.
This is multiple lines tied together here.
Yeah.
Now, it's only about a 3-pound test. So it's for trout, panfish, and stuff like that. It would be smaller fish. But you could tie this to your heavier line, and then you could set out what they call a trout line on there for fishing. Of course, then you have your bobber and your little weights and things too in there. But it's something you could carry with you to give you a little variety in diet when you're out there.
And it doesn't take up a lot of space, like you say. It's pretty compact.
Right. Yeah, because you could use willow branches or something.
Yeah,
for
you
your
wouldn't have to have
pole
a
or
fishing
whatever
pole. You
if wanted that too.
just make your own.
Right. Something else that is extremely useful back in the day, and it's actually very useful today, is rawhide. And rawhide, I think people probably have an idea what it is. It's just hide that has not been tanned. It's very hard, and durable hide. Okay. When you soak it in water, it gets pliable, so you can maneuver it. And and it does stretch when it's wet.
Mhm.
When you dry it, it shrinks back up and it makes it very hard. Okay. I've got things I've made out of it. I've made 2 shot pouches. This is for my buckshot and this is for my bird shot.
Now, do you
But
put a
it's-
form inside of that, Larry, to keep it, so when it shrinks to a certain size?
I just filled it full of shot.
Oh, okay.
And so that it shrinks to the shot
Shot
itself,
size,
you know.
okay.
Yeah, you can, otherwise you don't really have to. You can get it and just hold it, you know, press it so it stays there until it dries, and then it stays tight. There's other things you can make. You can make little containers with it. This one holds my wadding that I have for my shotgun. When I load the shotgun, I've got one that I carry my salt in.
Probably keeps it pretty waterproof
It
too.
keeps it pretty waterproof and
Yeah.
things. So there's a lot of different things you can use rawhide for. Excellent for handling or for repairing gun stocks, axe handles, things like that.
So is it one of those things,
Crack.
Larry, that maybe somebody such as yourself would carry maybe a little bit of that with them for repairs and things when they're going around? I mean, a small piece like this that you could adapt or
A small
use.
piece like this you might
Yeah.
carry
You could adapt it for some
to
use.
repair an axe handle or
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that, you know.
You know, put it around the axe handle and it shrinks and then
Right,
it's
right.
pretty solid.
For today, for you people out there that would want to experiment a little bit with this, I find an excellent place to find rawhide is doggy chew bones. And so they're readily available. Do not get the ones that have the beef flavoring on them. You know,
Right.
just get the plain old doggy chew bones. But it's excellent rawhide for making, you know, smaller items like shot pouches.
So you just
And repairing handles too.
soak it and then take the knots out of each end and then flatten it out or whatever way you want.
Flatten it out, get it pliable, wrap it on whatever you want to wrap it on to repair or whatever. And an excellent little thing to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, and fairly reasonable too.
Oh, very reasonable. Yeah. One other thing I have is just some material.
It's like maybe wool felt or something,
Yeah.
huh?
Well, this is wool. This is socks.
Okay.
Okay. Before people had socks, 17th, 18th, 19th century, socks were not readily available. A lot of people, only people that had money had socks. Okay. But even before socks, you would just have a piece of material like this, and it's called a foot wrap. Okay. During the winter time, of course, you would use wool. During the summertime, you may use linen or something much lighter.
And then how would they fasten this on their foot?
What you do is, you got a nice size hand if you want to put your hand in there. Okay. You put your hand in there like this. This would be your foot.
Right.
You take one. There's different ways of doing this. One way is you pull this over, and you tuck it under. You pull this back here that goes over your toe.
Yeah.
You pull this over here, and then back here you'll have
Some
a
extra.
point. Okay, and you take that and you bring that around, and then you tuck it in here.
So
And
it just
this goes under here, and then your foot just slides in your boot.
okay. So it wouldn't be necessarily fastened like with rawhide or
No.
with a safety pin or anything
No.
like that. It's just folded and tucked.
Correct.
Okay.
A lot of people prefer this even today. It's still used in the Russian army.
Well, I would imagine there's maybe less problems with soreness of their feet because it's just a solid piece of wool.
Right. Well, and that's why you don't fasten it with a lacing or anything like that, because what it does, it allows your foot to move in there, and you can actually get less blisters with this than
okay.
with a pair of socks.
Yeah, and then you could get different thicknesses of wool depending on how cold a climate you were working in.
Right. Now, the only thing is, if you get too much on your feet, you have to have boots to fit
Put a-
your
put-
foot in there, so it has to fit your foot.
Right,
You know.
right.
There.
So
But-
this was probably used all the way up till probably the beginning of the 19th century, until socks became fairly common. And maybe even for some of the poor people still used,
Absolutely.
probably up
There's
into the 20th
people that still use it
century.
today.
Still
Right.
use it.
There are people, well, like you say, I just looked it up on YouTube. The Russian army still uses it today. Okay. But some other people still use them today. But again, during the summertime, you would have a much lighter thing. But again, it's because socks were expensive
Yeah.
and they're not readily available to. And if you're on if you're hunting for, some of these people would go hunting for months on end. Well, if you had a pair of socks and they wore out, what did you do?
So if you had like 4 pieces of wool, say it was winter, you could interchange them. One would dry out, so the next day you could use a dry pair and that sort of thing.
Right.
Probably last you for a long time because there's no points. You can fold it different, so you're not putting all the stress on the same point, where the toes are always hitting the same spot.
There was one on YouTube. He said he loved this because if you had stocks, you didn't wear them very long and they got pretty stinky. Where this was much easier to clean and it would dry out extremely fast.
Yeah.
So you know.
I'll have to try it sometime. It sounds interesting,
Yeah.
and it sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and some people that I've been on YouTube, they love them. You know, so I have not tried it yet.
No,
So,
okay.
let's see. Excuse me. Okay, the last item I have here today are things for making fire. Fire is extremely important. Years ago in the wilderness, you were out there. It's important today. It's life or death. It can be make life or death out there. You know, if you can dry out or stay warm or to be able to cook your food. Things. So you need to have things that you can make fire with. Many of the things you have magnifying glass. I did not bring that along today. You can use a magnifying glass.
And today you could have done it. The sun was shining.
Beautiful day like today.
Yeah.
You can have it. You have to catch an ember though. And in order to catch an ember, you need something that ignites very easily. And so what I have, things that you can have, is char cloth. And char cloth is basically cloth that's made just the same way you make charcoal. It's burned without oxygen. So therefore, it turns black, but it does hold together. Okay. And you can take that.
Now, did they use any certain type of material? Cotton, wool?
It has
linen?
to be good material, cotton or linen cloth.
Be the best?
To be the best, yeah.
Okay.
So if you got good cotton or linen cloth, and I prefer cotton actually, for good char cloth on there. And you would take your flint and steel that you have. Well, with a magnifying glass on a day like today, you can take this and you'll take your magnifying glass and you focus on there, and you'll get an ember within like 5 seconds.
Really?
It just
That quick?
5 seconds, you got an ember on there.
No.
Okay.
If you made char cloth, evidently you'd make a lot of it because this little patch you might use for one fire.
This would be 1 or 2 fires.
One or
here.
two fires.
Right, yeah. And you take that with or if it's not sunny, you take your flint and steel, and when you take your flint and steel, you get a spark. You see those sparks.
Yeah.
And that catches on that char cloth, and then you can start your fire with that on those days where it's not sunny out there. But if you're on a long extended hunt, maybe you're out there for a week or two, you've made a bunch of fires, you run out of char cloth, you don't want to rip up your shirt to make more. So what you would look for, you would go out in the woods, and you can look for, it's called punky wood. And it's wood that's partially decayed and it's squishy. Okay. And you take that and you burn that the same way you make char cloth, and you come out with what's called char punk. And again, it's just black pieces of burnt wood. Okay. And you take that and it'll catch a spark just like that char cloth.
Okay.
And this, you could stay out there indefinitely because you go to any woods and there is punky wood.
Now, was there any way for, say, somebody that wanted to keep the fire going longer to carry it somewhat in a little container that you could carry some hot embers that you could carry it in that form?
This punky wood,
Yeah.
if you burn this, punky wood does not burn well. Okay.
Slow.
It smolders. So if you get this, you have your fire, and let's say you want to go to another campsite a few miles away, If you light this and get those embers burning on there, and then you put that in some bark or a container of some sort, a bucket or something like that, that will burn for hours. You know,
So you could take it to another
little bigger thing.
another campsite and then start the fire much quicker with that.
You wouldn't have to use your spark or
Yeah.
your cloth. You could just use the embers of this to carry that. So that's how a lot of people carried from one campsite to another. You can wrap this in moss. Moss is an excellent thing to wrap it in. You can still get air in there, but you don't get a lot of air, which makes it go real slow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, good.
Something else you can take out with you that I like to play with is what's called match cord. And now this is originated from the old matchlock rifles.
Okay.
But when the matchlock rifles went out of favor, they still made this. And what it is, it's made with potassium nitrate in there. It's soaked, then it's dried. And so again, with your
With
flint and steel or
it'll
your
take right
cloth,
off.
it'll give it an ember on there in it. But it's
Now, what do you use? Just one end of it to start it?
yeah, well, it's called slow match too.
Okay.
It burns extremely slow.
Okay.
So they used it for lighting cannons.
And
stuff
what is
that
it?
they
Cotton?
did.
You think, or
It's just cotton cord, and then it's again, when you're in the wilderness, an easy way to make it. Your potassium nitrate is in a black powder.
Okay.
So if you take a certain amount of black powder and put it in water, put this in there, take it out, let it dry, and you've got match cord.
And cotton cord would be somewhat equivalent to rope,
Correct. Yeah.
kind of rope, because
But-
it looks like about the
cotton.
size of a clothesline rope, or maybe a little bigger
Correct.
diameter.
Correct. Yeah. But you would need a cotton rope. Where
Nowadays, most
the
of it's
easiest thing,
synthetic.
right? The easiest thing to find is this punky wood, because you can find a whole tree of it.
Right.
So it's something that you could stay out there indefinitely.
Sure.
So
Maybe you could explain how you make the char cloth.
char cloth. Well, char cloth was found in an Egyptian site in a clay jar. So it's that old. Okay. What you do is you take a container. Most people use a container like this, a metal container. It can be any kind of container that doesn't burn. And you put, you have to have a hole in here of some sort, and just a small hole. And you put your raw material in there, your punky wood or your cloth, excuse me, and you set it on a fire. And smoke will come pouring out of that little hole. And you sit and watch it, and when smoke no longer pours out of that hole, you take it off the fire, let it cool down, and then you open it up and you'll have char cloth or char punk, either one. So you want to carry, if you're in the wilderness hunting for a long period of time, you do want to carry a container similar to this to in order to
Make some more
make some more
if you needed it. Sure, sure.
Now you can also, if you get some punky wood like this, and if you get that burning and you can put it out, it is hard to put out because it's so frayed, but you can put it out. That also, just that end, will also take a spark, not quite as easily as the punky or the char punk, but it will take a spark as well on there. So you can actually just use the end of that as well.
Sure, sure.
So,
Thank you, Larry, for showing this to us and explaining these things. I think for some of our audience, they probably know some of that, and some of them may not know. I just want to cover for you folks, when I started out, I was talking about some of the things we accomplished in 2020, and just to let you know that we put a new roof on the cabin, and that was quite a project. We put a heavier shingle on there, a kind of a real butt heavy shingle on there, and so I think we'll probably be good for probably 30 years on that. That was a project that about 6 or 7 of us worked on for, it was about a 3-week project, and so it was kind of a nice project. And well, Don lets me know now it was 5 weeks, but it seemed like 3 weeks, but I suppose for depending on what you were doing on the project, it was less or more sort of thing. Also with the town of Saratoga, we helped to create a blue landing. For you folks that don't know what a blue landing is, that's a landing for kayaks and for canoes, non-motorized sort of things. And so the blue landing is at the end of Wakely Road. There's a trail that goes down to the river, and you can walk down there, park your cars in our parking lot or something like that if you like, and then, or your trailers, or take them to a different site. Maybe you're going downriver, then you could leave one of the vehicles down there to pick them up. Also, on the end of Wakely Road with the town of Saratoga was created a cul-de-sac or a turnaround point. So now we got, for school buses, they can come down the end of Wakely Road and they can turn around. We got a nice radius down there that's meant for school buses, or certainly for cars with trailers for the kayaks or the canoes, but certainly for buses, they can turn around down there. So before this time, the buses, when the school groups came, they parked in our parking lot, and then if they had to transport like the meals and beverages further, they had to kind of take them overland. It was kind of a project for them to carry all that down there. Now they could take it down there, unload everything, and then the kids could even get out there, and then we could send the one group back to the school, and the other ones could go between the cabin, the blacksmith shop, or whoever's on the site at that day. So I think it'll be a great convenience to you. So if you're down on County Trunk Z sometime in the near future, check it out. It's a great improvement to the area. It was only possible with the town of Saratoga's help, and also we'd like to thank Domtar because they donated about 12.9 acres of land just to our north across the road from Wakely site, and so that gives us a greater campus so we could do this. Before that, that would have been land that was owned by Domtar, which without their permission wouldn't have been possible. So we'd like to thank Domtar for that great gift to us too. We have been trying for a number of years through different administrations of the Domtar local executives, and it finally happened. So thank you for that sort of thing. And a lot of other things. We expanded some of the trails. We did a lot of barking on the trails. Even we're barking up to probably about 2-3 weeks ago. We're doing barking on the trail.
If I don't know if a lot of people know about our trails out there because we don't advertise them a lot and things, but if you park in our parking lot out there, which many people know where that's at, and you go up by the school on the south end of the school, there's a walkway that starts, and we have a trail, a wonderful trail that, like Mike says, we've been barking and keeping up, that walks down by the river. It's a beautiful trail. So in this day of COVID and people want to get out and about a little bit, it's something that you can park out there, and more than welcome to just enjoy a day walking the trails.
The trail has been a trail that's been there for a while, but it was expanded and everything by Eagle Scout project, and then we're just kind of maintaining what the Eagle Scout project did. And now we're starting one, just started last week. It'll be on the southeastern side of the property, through the big white pine forest and everything, where there was no trail existing before. We're starting to make some trail system in there. So if you want to come down and cross-country ski, or just hike or something, depending on the weather or what time of year it is, you're certainly welcome to use our trails. They're open all the time, even when we're not there. Certainly we invite you to come down and walk the site anytime you want. Also, there's a trail that's semi-developed to the north of the property, the Domtar land that we received has an existing trail, and we've kind of made a connection between two existing trails to connect them together. So I would think by the time we're done in the next couple of years, we'll probably have a good 5 miles of trails down there. So it'll be a great thing that for nature walk or whatever way you want to do it, it'd be a great time to come down. So again, Larry, I want to thank you for coming on today. And
Thank you.
It was a great time, and thank you for all out in TV land for watching, and we'll see you next time with the Historic Point Basse Update. Thank you.